watching this, and I must say, it's a pleasure to do this and not have to take the boat out there to be with you. So um, technology is a great thing, isn't it?
And I will
So-
say both David and Christine offer. That's how good of people they are. And I hope you do it from your homes or your offices, wherever you are.
Right. Okay. So anyway, this project, just a little bit of background. It was born out of a capital needs study that we were not involved with, but that the district performed several years ago, and identified a bunch of issues with the school. And so we basically applied based on that project to look at the school, look at all the previous reports that have been done, and come up with a comprehensive plan that could address issues with this very important building. So Christian, move to the first slide. Okay, so here you see, where the school is relative to the, ferry terminal up there at the top. And we looked at all aspects of the school, not just the building itself, but the site of the school. We looked at the basic facts of the school, the size of the building, the number of students. Obviously, as you all know, it's a very unique place and in a unique place. So we looked at all of that. We looked at existing systems, amenities, utilities, programs that are held in the building, and had conversations with Christian and Karen before him regarding how the school is operated and some of the other programs. The reports that I mentioned briefly in my introduction were these 2015 facilities conditions surveys and studies that were done by another architectural firm, going through all of that. And they had engineers on that team as well that evaluated and weighed in on certain systems. And then also just, as far as the program of studies of what the school is trying to have essentially as its mission and its program of studies. To get the project off and running and to get it situated so that we could properly coordinate with the state education department, one of the first things we did was hire a surveyor from Connecticut that came out and did all the proper research and provided a full A2 survey of the property that identified all the features, boundary lines, topography, because we do think that this project clearly has some site elements to it. So we needed that survey to get going. We also had a firm come out and do hazardous material testing and prepare a very detailed report about that. And then basically as a firm, we looked at the design and what we could do to the building architecturally to accomplish the goals. And then we had a very large construction company in Connecticut, O&G Construction, who graciously offered to take our drawings and our narratives of the scope of work and assign very real dollars to them. So if we move on to the individual slides, I'll walk you through. The priorities of the project are listed right here in the orange captions. One of the very first things that we identified was the security elements of the school that needed to be addressed, with the office located pretty far away from the entrance and no secure vestibule and all of that. And if somebody were to be locked out of the school for the purposes of security, they don't really have an opportunity to be protected while they're out there. We also, as we examined the facility as in its layout, realized the layout of the whole elementary school area needed to be addressed. It's really just kind of an open area and the kids, the noise and the way any kind of separation between grades is very difficult in that environment. And you also have the special education office located in that area, and the layout of that is not really ideal. The media center, as you know, is also the hub of your school, and it's great, and it's great to see how the kids use that space and work within it. But one of the concerns we noted was the fact that it is so open to the entire school, and so therefore it makes it a little harder to use it as a working environment. And then there's just some mechanical issues, related to the fact that it's open like that, and we have computer lab in there and some of those things that generate a lot of heat. And we also, Ken and his team from RZ Design looked at the existing systems, and we had discussions about the program, especially the summer camp, and the fact that air conditioning could be utilized, and other improvements to the system. The systems that you have right now are pretty much original to the school. So we're talking, I think, early 1970s. As you walk around the site, there's a lot of settling and cracking in the sidewalks, which is not only unsightly, but could provide hazard or liability to the district if somebody were to get hurt. And the playground itself is, could use a little help. So those were the priorities that were identified to us, and so we set out to address those in our concept design. Here's the sketch of the school. This is just a hand-drawn sketch of how the school is laid out, and we really kind of identified there in the kind of orangey colored pencil these sort of administrative areas, of the school, separate from the blue areas, which are academic. And what we created was an environment which could create a secure entry and kind of rearrange the administrative wing, and not only make it more secure, but allow more supervision for that area, allow people to access the office directly. There's actually a window in there from that secure vestibule, so that if people didn't know who a person was that was arriving, they could perhaps check their ID and things like that before they actually let them into the building. In the lower right corner of this floor plan diagram, you'll see that we completely reimagined the educational wing without any expansion or anything, but just simply dividing it up in a different fashion so that we could create actual classrooms and a hallway that circulates through the space, so that the environment for learning for these kids is a much better environment. The little lines that you see there between classrooms with little dots on them represent movable partitions. So we maintain some of the flexibility that we wanted in the school. In the center of that, we relocated the special ed office and classroom in the middle there to provide a nice environment where there's the classroom and the office for the special education teacher, with communication between those rooms directly. So it's just a better layout of how all of that can work. So from, and this is the concept sketch closest to our final plan. In the time working with Christian and Jim and others at the school, we worked out a variety of different solutions, and this was simply the solution that we really felt accomplished the most for what we were trying to do. If we move to the next slide, what you can see is that after we settled on that the concept was strong, we had modeled the existing school in the computer, and we moved forward to create more defined plans, so that we clearly defined the scope and the extent of this project. And then using this drawing in addition to others and narratives, we were able to clearly define the scope of the project so that we were comfortable when we presented it to the people on the island for approval, that they knew exactly what they were getting and that we could be confident in what we were telling them about the features and the costs and all of that. So if we move on here, here's just basically pulling apart all those priorities and basically describing how they were accomplished. You can see at the top there an entrance canopy that we created to shelter the entrance, whether it's inclement weather or not. It's just a better feature, defines the entry a little bit. We enhanced the walkway and actually relocated the flagpole, and actually had a little fun with it in creating a little bit of a nautical theme as we ran the nautical flags, down from the flagpole onto the canopy, just kind of as a nod to your unique location. As far as the security enhancements, that was to basically create that vestibule as you enter the school, which is also a energy improvement for the school, but its primary reason was for a secured multi-stage process where you were buzzed into the school, and then you're in the vestibule where you can talk to those in the office and tell them who you are and why you're there, and then you can come in, and then by rearranging the administrative area, you'll see there at the sort of back of the image, you see that as soon as you come into the school, there's a glass wall there with a door, and allows you to immediately go into the administrative area without really wandering around the school and trying to find Jim or Christian or Allie or whoever you're looking for. Right here at the foreground is, you can see a little bit, we basically took the opening to the media center and created a glass wall there as well to control sound, and then again further to create a secure environment that we could, if something bad were to happen, it would be a lot easier for the school to be controlled. So if we move to the next slide, this is a slide that we created to better explain what the proposal is for that elementary wing. And as you can see, those actual classrooms are now defined within that space. And there are folding partitions between some of the spaces for flexibility, and as we move through, we can rearrange the rooms. If there's noise from one room, it can be isolated from other rooms. And so it really just is a much better functioning portion of the school, again, done without any real additions or anything like that. The center core is that special education classroom that I talked about with the adjacent office for the special education teacher. And then we were actually also able to, accommodate some bathrooms in the way we rearranged this area. So I think this is going to be a pretty significant upgrade to the educational facilities within this school. And, I think, again, working with Christian, we were pretty excited about the way this came out, and I think it's a pretty big upgrade. So let's move to the next slide. Here's the media center. Again, our computer rendering doesn't necessarily capture exactly how it looks, but it is, it's pretty much your existing computer render, your existing media center. But if you notice to the left, we've actually created a protrusion out into the courtyard, simply to grab a little more space, because this space is so important and can get kind of crowded with all the activity in there. So we really felt that that was a very easy way to capture some space out of that courtyard, which is, courtyards are nice, but they're relatively underutilized, and that way we can grab that. Another element of this enclosure, the media center, has to do with being able to, for Ken to be able, and his team to be able to accomplish what they need to do with the mechanical systems, and balancing the different zones in the school. There are crowded areas with a lot of heat gain from people. there are computer labs with a lot of heat gain from electronics. And it just becomes, when a school is all open, it's not only noisy, but it becomes very difficult from a air conditioning and air control point of view to create an environment. And obviously, Ken could maybe elaborate on what we're really doing, but we all know that a good, healthy school environment makes it easier to learn. So let's move on. So here's the fun, exciting stuff about this project is the infrastructure of your actual school, so that you have a school that will last you for a long, long time. So Ken Hipsky from RZ Design is going to elaborate on the mechanical systems and lighting systems and all the things that are proposed as part of this project.
Thank you, David. I mean, I know we all have different ideas of fun, but yeah, but the mechanical and electrical and systems in the building are they're great. They've been well maintained. You've got more life at them than you were supposed to, according to ASHRAE. But they're old. They're limited in what they can do, at least from a zoning and a control standpoint. There's limited air conditioning in the building as it is, and they're not as efficient as the newer systems. Including the lighting, you got in most cases fluorescent lighting, which is very good, but today's LED lighting, much more efficient and will last a lot longer. From a bulb replacement standpoint than the fluorescent lighting that's there. And the controls, I mean, you've got an older pneumatic system in there. It does function well. It limits what you can do, as far as setting the building back or zoning it, to try to save energy. We would be looking at kind of just upgrading all those items.
Great. And one thing to sort of mention on the mechanical systems that Ken and I were talking about is that the current system that's in the school is, done the way they did it, 40 years ago, or 50. I think we're approaching 50 years perhaps. And so what you have is you have a lot of exhaust out of the school, which draws fresh air in through open windows and cracks and gaps and things like that. And so it's not very well controlled. And so you get the fresh air in, so you get the, that, but it's not, that air comes in as unconditioned. It's coming in during the winter. It's coming in through, the cracks, as cold air. And so the modern systems can control that process by bringing the fresh air in as we want it, in the ways that we want it, and even by capturing the energy in our exhaust and transferring it to the intake. So it's really just the systems are old, and we can do some really wonderful things with the new systems. As far as the roof goes, you can see the picture of the roof, and that we definitely have some ponding that's going on. There are some leaks throughout the school. And then as part of anytime you go through the money and the effort of replacing a roof on a municipal building like this, you make the effort to further upgrade the insulation systems to lower, the heat loss out of the building, and protect it better. And then, obviously, the school would expect that any new systems would have a very extended warranty and protect you from unexpected costs. Just after you'd spent a significant sum on this whole project, you want to make sure that the systems that go in and the components that go in, have strong warranties. So let's move forward. So as I mentioned in my introduction, we were able to get O&G Construction from Connecticut to do a very detailed analysis of this. And there's pages and pages a backup of what they went through, and, you know, relative to even taking the costs and assigning them to your unique location. They went as far as looking at ferry schedules and cost schedules to shipping materials to the island, and did an amazing job trying to account for all of that. So what you have here is, in any architectural building project, you have two types of costs. You have hard costs and soft costs. And the hard costs is what we think of as the true construction costs of the project. And you can see the main elements kind of lined up there as bullet points. But one of the things, just to explain to you, is the contingency. And you'll see the contingency as both hard costs and soft costs. And what that represents is that we're very early in the process here on this project. And, you know, we haven't done incredibly detailed drawings. We've really just defined the project. And we're still several years away from building the project. And so what we need to do at every step of the way in a project like this is make sure we account for things that we don't know. And so that's what that contingency is. And again, it's in multiple different places, really just to protect you against the unknown. And this year is a perfect year to want to be protected against the unknown. There's the construction manager's fees, there's bonding and insurance, which is there. And then, you know, there's a couple other elements of this that were separated out when we did our cost estimate. One of which is to remove what's called the storage building, the old kind of bowling alley building behind the school, which is really just decrepit and needs to be removed. And then there were numerous alternates, because we really didn't know where these numbers were going to come out, that we put them in our project as alternates, like the roof, the air conditioning, the fire suppression system, and even so far as improvements and maintenance to the brick on the building itself. And so what we did is we put all of that stuff in that cost estimate and came up with that $6.9 million plus number that you see at the very top. Then, prior to discussing the kind of money that the district needs to come up with, the total amount of money they need to come up with, we identified all the proposed soft costs for the project, which you can see all listed out there, which adds another $842,000 to the project. And again, as you can see, the last item there, an owner's contingency of $250,000, just to account for things, unknown things, just because it's prudent to do so, rather than realizing later that you're out of money and you got to go back and somehow find a way to pay for your project to be completed. So that comes up with a total project cost there. You see just over $7.8 million. And I think those numbers have been presented to you before, maybe even several times before, because talking to Christian, you know, we were told that, you know, the community is behind these numbers and supportive of this project, and wants to move this project forward. And so then that's where Christine got involved, and is going to present several slides explaining how, as a community, you can move forward and pay for this project.
Sure. Thank you very much, David. And thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight, even though we're a few hundred miles apart. So I want to go over the financing plan and what the tax impact is estimated to be related to the capital project, and go over some of the variables that go into that calculation so that you can kind of get your mind around what we're looking at. So when we look at a financing plan for a school district capital project, there's two sides to the puzzle. The first side is the actual borrowing that the district will undertake, and the other side is the building aid and trying to maximize that building aid so you can have as much revenue coming in as possible to help offset those taxes. So with respect to the financing plan, one item we look at is capital reserve. Are there capital reserve monies available to use? And in this case, the district has $1 million of capital reserve funds that they'd like to apply to the project. What that does is that reduces the amount to be borrowed. So you can accomplish the $8 million worth of work, but only have to borrow $7 million. Building aid eligibility, that's a big piece. We look at maximum cost allowances. And so the state looks at a district and they do a calculation and they say that this is the maximum dollar amount that we are willing to aid the district for a capital project. And so within that maximum dollar amount, that scope of work has to be deemed aidable by the district, which there's no concern here for what does fall within that maximum cost allowance, that would be aidable work. The bond percentage, that's the percentage of the scope that qualifies for state aid. And so we're looking at 57% for this project. And that's a lower number because that maximum cost allowance that the State Education Department calculated is much lower than what the total project cost is. And so then the last piece for building aid is the building aid ratio. And so the district realizes a 10% building aid ratio, meaning those aidable expenses that fall within that maximum cost allowance, the district will receive a reimbursement from the state at 10% of those expenses. The state also looks at building aid and the repayment stream, and they have what they call an assumed amortization. And so when a project of this nature, which is majority reconstruction, occurs, the state will pay back the district over 15 years. If you were to build a large addition, then they would pay it back over 20 years. Or if you were to build a brand new building, they'd pay it back over 30 years. And so that's important because we want to know when that revenue stream is coming in so that we can mimic the debt to align with that revenue stream. So next we have the project timeline. This is important because we want to know when the debt needs to be incurred, and we also need to know when the building aid will start being paid to the district. And so voter approval, as we all know, we're looking for the voters to approve the project December 1 of 2020. And should they do that, the district then goes into design phase. Dave mentioned that they have the schematics and so on, but he's going to get into the much deeper design phase. He'll take all of that information and submit it to New York State Education Department. And they then have to review it and approve it. So we're looking at submitting to them August of 21, and then looking for approval from them January of 22. They can take a very long time to approve a project, or as it is now, it's a much shorter time, so that might occur a little bit sooner. The district can then go and do the bidding and contract award. We're looking at February 22 to April 22 for that to happen. And then our construction period, summer of 22 through summer of 23. And we'll have a phase construction over those 2 summers. And then the final cost reports and certificate of substantial completion will be submitted to SCD at the end of the project. And the date for that we're estimating to be December of 2023. And that's important. That date is very important because until that final cost report is submitted, the state will not start the payments of building aid. So then with respect to interest rates, we obviously want to know what type of interest rates we'd be looking at. There's a state assumed interest rate. So that building aid payment that the state is paying you, they understand that they're requiring, for lack of a better word, districts to amortize their projects over a term because that is how their building aid is going to come in. And so they assume an interest rate and include that within your building aid payment. And that assumed interest rate right now is 2.5%. And then borrowing rates, what would you actually borrow as a district? What would your interest rate be? And we're estimating 2.10% at this point. That's very conservative. If you were to go to the market, say tomorrow, you're probably looking at closer to a 1.5%. Because we're a few years out, we want to make sure that we're conservative and try to look at worst case scenario, if you will. So as you know, the proposition is for an $8 million project with use of $1 million of capital reserve. And if you remember back to Dave's last slide, the total came to $7,825,000. And so he also discussed a lot of unknowns at this point, unknown as far as, is the construction on the island going to be more expensive than what's expected to be, transportation costs, so on and so forth. The district is allowed to spend up to the 8 million. You're always allowed to spend less. And so should the project come in below that 8 million, that's what the district would spend, and that's what the district would borrow. You're not obligated to spend that full 8 million. So at the top of the slide, I included the information we just discussed: building aid ratio of 10%, bond percentage of 57%, and building aid term of 15 years. So then the financial impact turns out to be, we have a borrowing term of 16 years. That's 1 year more than what the building aid payments are. And that's because we would recommend the district issue a bond anticipation note, which is a 1-year obligation while construction is going on. Once we know the final expenses and we know, let's say it comes in at the 7,825,000 below that 8 million mark, then we would only borrow what's needed. We don't want to borrow any more than necessary. And at that point, we would convert to long-term. We have, again, estimated interest rate 2.1. So the total estimated interest expense over the life of the borrowing is about 1.4 million. That correlates to an average annual local share, which would be the taxes to be raised for the project, of 555,000. And that's a tax rate impact per 1,000 full value of 60 cents. And so if you were a taxpayer and your home had a full value of $500,000, you'd be looking at about 300, if we round $300 per year for the 16 years. So that's where we are with respect to the financial impact of the project. And this is something that, as the project develops, we'll continue to update and discuss with the district. But that's where we are at this point.
Thank you, Christine. And as we get to this last slide here, just if anybody, I don't know how this is going to work with this meeting, but if anybody has any questions, they certainly are free to ask them now, and or get their questions to Christian, and we can answer them at any time. So we're here for you whenever you have a question. Let's